The outcast and the warrior. The arena was massive, filled with thousands of spectators from different planets. Bright lights shone down on the battleground, where the strongest warriors in the galaxy would fight. The Intergalactic Combat Tournament was not just a game. It was a test of power, strength, and survival. Only the best could win. Mira stood at the edge of the arena, her small hands clenched into fists. She was tiny compared to the warriors around her. Her species, the Velari, were one of the smallest in the galaxy. They were not warriors. They were weak, fragile, and often ignored. Mira had come here to prove them wrong. She had trained for years, learning speed, intelligence, and strategy. But when she signed up for the tournament, the judges laughed at her. "You? A fighter?" One of them scoffed. "You're smaller than my hand." The crowd joined in the laughter. Even the other fighters looked at her with amusement or pity. Mira's heart sank, but she refused to leave. "Let me fight," she said, her voice firm. The judges sighed. "Fine," one said, "but you won't last a second." She was placed in the lowest betting rank. No one believed she could win. A human champion. Across the arena, a tall, powerful warrior stepped into the ring. The crowd roared in excitement. He was Commander Jack Lawson, a human soldier known for his bravery and strength. He had fought in wars, defeated monsters, and survived battles that others could not. Humans were one of the strongest species in the galaxy. They were not the biggest, nor the fastest, but they were the most determined. Jack stretched his muscles, preparing for his first fight. He noticed the tiny Velari girl standing near the edge. She looked out of place. "She's competing," Jack muttered, raising an eyebrow. He had seen many fighters, but never someone this small. Nearby, a group of aliens surrounded Mira. "You should leave before you get hurt," a tall, reptilian warrior sneered. "You're nothing." Mira ignored him. She knew this would happen. Jack watched as the aliens continued mocking her. Something about the situation bothered him. He had always respected fighters, no matter their size or strength. To him, real warriors were those who never gave up. The first fight begins. The first round of the tournament began. Two massive fighters stepped into the arena. One was a robotic war machine, the other a four-armed beast. The battle was brutal. Blades clashed, energy beams exploded, and the ground shook. Mira watched carefully, studying their movements. She wasn't strong like them, but she was faster and smarter. As the fight ended, Mira heard loud laughter. She turned and saw a group of aliens placing bets. "Who wants to bet against the tiny Velari?" One alien laughed. "I'll put 500 credits that she loses in the first round." Mira's fists clenched. "I'll take that bet," she said firmly. The crowd fell silent for a moment. Then, everyone burst into laughter again. "You? Betting on yourself?" The alien smirked. "Fine. Prepare to lose everything." Mira's heart pounded, but she stayed calm. She had a plan. Jack, who had been listening, shook his head. He admired her courage, but he also knew how dangerous this tournament was. "She's either brave or crazy," he muttered. A moment of respect. The next few fights continued. The arena was filled with cheers and roars as warriors fought for their survival. Then the announcer called the next match. Commander Jack Lawson versus Borak, the Destroyer. The crowd exploded with excitement. This was the fight they were waiting for. Borak was a giant, nearly 10 feet tall, with razor-sharp claws and skin like metal. Mira watched as Jack stepped forward, calm and confident. The fight began, and within seconds, Jack dodged Borak's attack with incredible speed. The human moved like a storm, hitting fast, avoiding blows, and attacking at the right moments. Within minutes, Borak was on the ground, defeated. The arena erupted in cheers, but Mira stood frozen. She had never seen anyone fight like this. It was not just strength. It was strategy, speed, and determination. For the first time, she felt something strange. Respect. Jack glanced towards her. Their eyes met. For a moment, Mira saw something in his gaze. Not mockery, not amusement, but understanding. Jack smirked slightly and walked away. Mira's heart raced. She was no longer just an outcast in this tournament. Now she had found someone worth watching. Suspense and setup for next part. Mira still had a long way to go. The fights would only get harder, and the real dangers of the tournament were still hidden. But for the first time, she felt a tiny spark of hope. Could she really survive this? And more importantly, could a tiny Villari actually win? The first encounter. The training grounds behind the tournament arena were eerily quiet at night. The distant echoes of battle still rang through the air. But here, away from the noise, Mira found a small corner to sit. Her tiny hands clenched into fists, her heart still racing from what she had witnessed. Commander Jack Lawson. She had never seen a human fight before. She had heard stories. Humans were resilient, adaptable, and impossible to break. But watching Jack move, seeing how he fought with calculated aggression and unshakable confidence, was something else. Mira knew she was fast, but Jack was precise. His attacks weren't wild. They were measured, tactical, and devastating. She sighed, leaning her head back against the cold stone wall. Tomorrow would be her first fight. No one believed she would survive. Neither did she. But she had no choice. A dangerous world. Mira was so lost in thought that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching. A low, mocking voice cut through the silence. Well, well, if it isn't the tournament's biggest joke. Mira's eyes snapped open. 3 towering figures loomed over her, their shadows blocking the dim blue glow of the artificial sky. They were from the Revokian race, large reptilian warriors with sharp claws and scales as hard as steel. One of them, the largest, crouched beside her. His slit-like eyes gleamed with amusement. You actually think you'll fight tomorrow? He sneered. The only reason you're here is because they needed a weakling for the opening round. The second Revokian smirked. Maybe we should save her the embarrassment and break her now. Mira's fingers twitched. She knew she had no chance in a direct fight. These were trained killers, twice her size. She stayed silent. The leader grinned at her hesitation. He reached forward, grabbing the front of her cloak, lifting her easily into the air. Mira struggled, kicking her legs, but it was useless. Her heart pounded. Would they really attack her before the match even began? She opened her mouth to shout for help. And then, without warning, the Revokian froze. A deep, quiet voice cut through the air like a blade. Put her down. The human steps in. The grip on Mira's cloak loosened. The Revokian turned, and his confident smirk faded instantly. Jack Lawson stood a few steps away, arms crossed, watching. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't even in a fighting stance. But the sheer presence of him sent an unmistakable message. The leader hesitated, then let go of Mira. She dropped lightly to the ground and quickly stepped back. The second Revokian growled. What's the problem, human? This is none of your business. Jack didn't move. She's a contestant, isn't she? The first Revokian scoffed. Barely. Jack's expression didn't change, but something in his posture shifted, something dangerous. Then let her fight, he said. If she's weak, she'll lose tomorrow. Unless you're afraid she'll surprise you. The taunt was subtle, but effective. The Revokians bristled. Their species prided themselves on strength, and Jack had just implied they were cowards. The leader hissed but backed off. She won't last a minute in the arena, he spat. And when she loses, we'll be the first ones laughing. With that, the Revokians turned and disappeared into the shadows. For a few moments, there was only silence. Then Jack turned to Mira. You good? Mira hesitated, still stunned. She had expected him to walk away now, that the fight was over. Instead, he was waiting for her answer. She nodded slowly. Jack studied her for a moment, then exhaled. "Smart of you not to fight them," he said, his voice calmer now. "They wanted an excuse to break you before the match." Mira frowned. "I don't need your help." Jack raised an eyebrow. "Really?" She crossed her arms, her tiny frame barely reaching his waist. "I would have figured something out." Jack smirked. "Oh, like what?" Mira opened her mouth, then closed it. She had no idea. Jack chuckled. "Thought so." Her face burned in embarrassment. But instead of mocking her, Jack's tone turned serious. "Listen, the way you fight doesn't matter to these guys. Strength isn't about size. It's about how well you use what you have." Mira blinked. That was different. Most people looked at her and saw weakness. Jack looked at her and saw potential. An unlikely alliance. Jack started walking away, but then paused. "You got a plan for your first match?" Mira hesitated. She had strategies, sure. But now, after watching the real fights, she realized they weren't enough. Jack seemed to read her thoughts. "Come with me," he said. "I'll show you a thing or two." Mira frowned. "Why would you help me?" Jack shrugged. "Because I hate watching people get crushed before they even get a chance." She studied him carefully, looking for mockery or some hidden joke. But there was none. For the first time, someone wasn't laughing at her. Mira took a slow breath, then followed him. The dark conspiracy. The night before the tournament's next round, the underground halls of the combat arena were eerily silent. The air smelled of metal, sweat, and blood, remnants of countless battles fought in the name of glory. Mira walked carefully through the dim corridors, her small frame casting a faint shadow under the flickering neon lights. She had spent hours training with Jack, absorbing everything he taught her. Speed over strength, strategy over brute force, observation over reaction. But something still felt off. A nagging feeling in her gut told her that this tournament wasn't just about proving one's strength. Something deeper was happening beneath the surface, and she was about to find out exactly what. Whispers in the dark. Mira had no intention of sneaking around. She just needed some air. But as she walked past a hidden section of the arena, she heard voices. Low, whispered, secretive. She stopped. Two large figures stood near a control panel, their forms barely visible in the dim light. Their conversation was in hushed tones, but Mira recognized one of them immediately. General Varzak, the head organizer of the tournament. A fearsome warrior of the Grakdar Empire, he was known for running blood sport competitions across the galaxy. Ruthless, efficient, and respected. The second figure, shrouded in darkness, was speaking. Their voice was deep, mechanical, almost synthetic. Weak species must be eliminated. The tournament is just a tool for selection. Mira's breath caught in her throat. Eliminated. Selection. Varzak growled. And the humans? The humans are unpredictable. The second figure admitted. They adapt too quickly. They are a problem. Mira's heart pounded. A problem. For who? And why? Varzak folded his arms. The human champion, Jack Lawson, is more dangerous than expected. Mira stiffened. The second figure nodded. If he keeps winning, it could ruin the experiment. Make sure he never reaches the final round. Mira froze. This wasn't just a tournament. It was a trap. A system designed to eliminate weaker species while ensuring only the strongest thrived. She had to warn Jack. But before she could move, a cold, metallic voice growled behind her. What do we have here? The hunter and the prey. Mira spun around, her heart hammering. A towering cybernetic enforcer loomed over her, its glowing red eyes scanning her body. Security. She had been caught. Without thinking, Mira ran. The enforcer lunged, its massive hand swiping at her, but she was already moving, darting into the narrow maintenance tunnels beneath the arena. Alarms blared. Red lights flashed across the halls. Her tiny frame allowed her to slip through tight spaces, but she could hear the heavy metallic footsteps behind her. They were coming. She needed an exit. Fast. Jack makes his move. Jack Lawson was sharpening his combat knife when the alarms went off. A deep sense of unease crept into his chest. Something wasn't right. His instincts had been screaming at him for days. This tournament was more than just a fight for glory. Then he heard it. Mira's voice. Faint, but urgent, echoing from the lower tunnels. Jack moved. He sprinted down the hallway, weaving past confused fighters and security personnel. When he reached the maintenance sector, he found her, cornered by 3 cybernetic enforcers. Mira's back was pressed against the wall, her small hands balled into fists. Jack didn't hesitate. He struck first. A single precise movement. His combat knife sliced through the nearest enforcer's leg joint. The machine stumbled, giving Mira just enough space to slip past. Jack grabbed her by the arm. Move. They ran. The enforcers followed, their mechanical limbs clanking against the steel floors. Jack took a sharp left, dragging Mira into a hidden supply room. He quickly shut the door and placed a hand over her mouth. Quiet, he whispered. Footsteps stopped outside. The enforcers scanned the hallway. Jack held his breath. Mira, trembling but alert, didn't make a sound. After a few tense seconds, the enforcers moved on. Jack exhaled and released Mira. What the hell was that? He demanded. Mira looked up at him, eyes wide with fear, but also determination. The tournament is a lie, she whispered. It's a test, and they're going to kill you. Jack's expression hardened. Tell me everything. The truth unfolds. Mira told him everything. The secret conversation, the plan to eliminate weak species, the fear that humans were a threat. Jack listened without interruption. When she finished, he rubbed his jaw, his mind already forming a plan. So this whole thing is just a way to get rid of species they don't like, he muttered. Mira nodded. They want you gone. They think you're a problem. Jack smirked, but there was no humor in it. Well, that's the nicest thing anyone said about me all week. Mira frowned. This isn't a joke. Jack's expression turned serious. I know. He thought for a moment. This means one thing. He looked at her. We can't just win. We have to destroy their entire plan. Mira's eyes widened. You want to expose them. Jack nodded. If we win, we get the spotlight. And if we get the spotlight, we get the chance to show the whole galaxy what's really happening. Mira hesitated. Winning was already impossible. But now they had to survive long enough to expose a massive conspiracy. She looked at Jack. He wasn't afraid. Instead, his eyes burned with something else. Defiance. A spark of human resilience. Mira took a deep breath. Then let's do it. Jack grinned. That's the spirit. They didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just a tournament anymore. This was a war. A deadly betrayal. The training chambers of the combat arena were nearly empty. Most fighters were either resting or celebrating their victories. But Mira and Jack had no time for that. They were preparing for a battle much bigger than the tournament. Jack adjusted the wrappings around his fists, his expression unreadable. Mira, still breathless from their last escape, paced nervously. The revelation about the tournament's true purpose had changed everything. This wasn't about winning. It was about exposing the conspiracy. And to do that, they had to survive. Mira swallowed hard. If they know we're onto them, they'll come after us. Jack nodded. They already have. That means we don't have much time. Before Mira could respond, the chamber doors slammed open. A figure stood in the doorway. Tall, broad, covered in scared battle armor. And he wasn't alone. Behind him, 6 heavily armed enforcers stepped inside. Mira's blood turned to ice. Jack slowly straightened, his eyes narrowing. Of course, he muttered. I should have known. The warrior before them stepped forward. His name was Commander Roken, Jack's old friend, and now his betrayer. A past that should have stayed buried. Jack and Roken had fought together years ago. Back when Jack was still a soldier, before he became a champion, he and Roken had been stationed on the same warfront. They had saved each other's lives countless times. But now Roken stood before him, eyes cold, jaw tight, his hand resting on the hilt of a massive energy blade. Jack exhaled slowly. "So, what's it gonna be, old friend?" Roken's expression didn't change. "Stand down, Jack." Mira took a step back, eyes darting between them. Jack tilted his head. "You're really gonna sell me out? After everything?" Roken hesitated, just for a second, but then his voice turned hard. "I don't have a choice." Jack's fingers curled into fists. "Yeah," he said softly. "You do." The trap closes. The enforcers raised their weapons. Mira's heart pounded. Jack shifted slightly, putting himself between her and them. Roken sighed. "I didn't want this, Jack. But you're a threat now." Jack smirked. "I was always a threat." Roken's jaw clenched. "Don't make this harder than it has to be." Jack glanced at Mira. She understood immediately. "Move fast. Strike first. No hesitation." Then, chaos erupted. Jack lunged at Roken. Mira dove to the side just as the enforcers opened fire. Energy blasts scorched the air where she had been standing. She rolled, using her small size to slip between two enforcers. One swung a baton at her. She ducked, then lashed out with a precise strike to his leg. The enforcer stumbled. Jack, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of motion. He caught Roken's first strike on his forearm, twisting away before driving an elbow into his ribs. Roken retaliated with brutal efficiency, swinging his energy blade in a lethal arc. Jack dodged, barely, feeling the heat graze his shoulder. The enforcers kept coming. Mira darted and weaved between them, using their size against them. She wasn't stronger, but she was faster. Jack dropped an enforcer with a swift kick to the head. He grabbed another by the wrist, twisting hard enough to break it, then tore the weapon from his hand. Blaster in hand, he turned, just in time to see Roken's fist crashing toward his face. The fight no one wanted. Jack hit the ground hard. His vision blurred for half a second before instincts took over. He rolled away just as Roken's energy blade slammed into the ground where his head had been. Dust and sparks exploded around them. Jack gritted his teeth. "Okay, that one actually hurt." Roken didn't smile. "This doesn't have to end this way," he said, stepping forward. Jack wiped blood from his mouth. "Then let me go." Roken shook his head. "You don't get it, Jack. This tournament, it's bigger than us. The galaxy needs a way to filter out the weak." Jack's expression darkened. "That's not survival," he said coldly. "That's murder." Roken hesitated. Jack pressed forward. "How many innocent people have you let die for this so-called balance? How many warriors who fought with honor, just like we did?" Roken's grip tightened on his blade. "You don't understand." Jack's eyes burned. "No," he growled. "I understand perfectly." Then he attacked. Mira's choice. While Jack fought Roken, Mira was still dodging and weaving between the remaining enforcers, but they were relentless. One of them finally caught her arm, yanking her back. She gasped, struggling, but the enforcer lifted a blaster to her head. Jack saw it too late. Mira. She froze. Time slowed. She knew she had 1 second to decide. And she made her choice. With a sharp movement, she twisted her small frame just enough to bring her knee up into the enforcer's wrist. The blaster fired, missing her head by an inch. Before he could recover, she drove her tiny fist straight into his throat. The enforcer collapsed, choking. Mira panted, her pulse racing. She had just taken down a warrior 5 times her size. And in that moment she knew. She was no longer just fighting to survive. She was fighting to win. A line is crossed. Jack saw Mira take down her opponent. And in that split second of distraction, Roken struck. The blade sliced across Jack's side. Pain exploded through him. He stumbled back, pressing a hand to his wound. Blood dripped between his fingers. Roken stepped forward, breathing hard. "It's over, Jack." Jack met his eyes and smiled. "No," he said, voice like steel. "It's just getting started." Then he pulled the trigger. A single precise blaster shot. It hit Roken's shoulder, knocking him back. Jack didn't wait. He grabbed Mira's wrist. "We need to move. Now." Together, they ran. Behind them, Roken cursed in pain. But Jack knew this fight wasn't over. Roken had chosen his side. And next time, Jack wouldn't hold back. The ultimate showdown. The arena was deathly silent. Thousands of spectators sat in the towering stands, their eyes locked onto the battleground below. The air buzzed with tension, thick with anticipation, and the scent of scorched metal. This was it, the semi-final round of the Intergalactic Combat Tournament, the moment where warriors became legends or fell forgotten in the dust. And standing in the center of the arena, facing their deadliest challenge yet, were Jack Lawson and Mira. Across from them, a monster stood waiting. The apex predator. The warrior before them was not human. Not even close. His name was Draxus, and he was a Zyronian warlord, a towering reptilian juggernaut covered in obsidian armor. The Zyrons were known as the apex predators of the galaxy. Bigger, stronger, deadlier. And Draxus was their greatest champion. He stood nearly 10 feet tall, his muscular form gleaming under the arena lights. His long, spiked tail dragged across the sand, and his razor-sharp claws flexed in anticipation. When he smiled, his rows of serrated teeth glistened like blades. Mira swallowed hard. He could kill them both in seconds. Jack, however, stood calmly, arms loose, feet grounded, watching, calculating. Draxus rumbled a low laugh. "I expected a real fight," he said, his voice like grinding stone. His glowing yellow eyes landed on Mira, not a child and a human past his prime. Jack smirked. "Good. Underestimating me always works out great for people." Draxus's eyes narrowed. The announcer's voice boomed through the stadium. "Fighters, prepare for battle." Jack exhaled, rolling his shoulders. This was it. Mira stood beside him, her small fists clenched. They had one shot. They had to win. They had to survive. The gong sounded. The fight began. Dancing with death. Draxus moved first. He charged like a war tank, his massive claws ready to rip through flesh and bone. Jack didn't run. He sidestepped at the last second, just as Mira darted low, rolling between Draxus's legs. The beast's attack missed completely. The crowd gasped. Jack and Mira moved like ghosts, slipping past Draxus's brutal strikes by inches. Every time he swung, they were already gone. Jack's speed was legendary, but Mira's was inhuman. She was too small, too fast, too unpredictable. She struck pressure points, his knee, his ribs, his shoulder. Not enough to wound, but enough to slow him down. Jack, meanwhile, watched Draxus's movements carefully. He wasn't just dodging. He was analyzing, looking for a pattern, a weakness. Draxus roared in frustration. "You run like cowards." Jack smirked. "No, we fight smart." Draxus lashed out. His tail came whipping around at impossible speed. Jack barely had time to shout. "Naare." Crack. The tail slammed into her. Mira was sent flying. She crashed into the ground, rolling several times before coming to a stop. Jack's blood went cold. Mira. She didn't move. Draxus grinned, stepping toward her. Jack saw red. Jack Lawson unleashed. Jack didn't think. Didn't plan. He attacked. Hard. Faster than anyone expected. Jack closed the distance. He ducked under Draxus's swipe, came up with a brutal uppercut, then twisted behind him, driving his elbow into the base of Draxus's skull. The warlord staggered. The crowd exploded. Jack kept moving. He was smaller, weaker, slower, but he was relentless. A human didn't win by being stronger. A human won by being smarter. Jack dodged, struck, moved, struck again. He targeted joints, nerves, weak spots. Draxus swung wildly, but Jack was never there. The warlord growled in frustration, and that's when Mira rose to her feet. The comeback. Mira hurt everywhere. Her vision was blurry. Her ribs felt like they were on fire. But she saw Jack, still fighting, not giving up, and something inside her ignited. She wouldn't be weak anymore. She wouldn't be small anymore. She moved, not away, toward, fast, faster than ever before. Before Draxus could react, she leaped onto his back, wrapping her arms around his massive throat. Her tiny hands pressed against his pressure points. Draxus roared in fury, trying to shake her off. But Jack took the opportunity. He slid under Draxus's guard, grabbing a fallen weapon from the ground, a shock blade. He drove it into Draxus' exposed ribs. Draxus howled in pain. Mira tightened her grip. The warlord's knees buckled. And then, he fell. Victory. And a warning. The arena was dead silent. Then, thunderous applause. The crowd went wild. Jack and Mira stood over Draxus's fallen body, breathing heavily. They had won. But Jack didn't celebrate. His eyes lifted to the VIP stands, where the tournament's organizers sat, watching, waiting. They had tried to eliminate him, tried to silence him, but he was still here. And now, he was coming for them. Jack wiped blood from his lip and smirked. Better luck next time. The last stand. The night before the final match, the arena was silent. No roaring crowds, no flashing lights, no celebration, only darkness. Mira and Jack stood in the abandoned training grounds, staring at the vast arena through a massive glass window. They had made it. Somehow, against impossible odds, they had survived every round. They had defeated warriors from across the galaxy. They had uncovered the truth behind the tournament. And now, they were the last ones left. But something felt wrong. Jack exhaled slowly. This is a trap. Mira nodded. I know. The final match wasn't just a fight. It was an execution. The invitation. A mechanical voice echoed through the empty halls. Finalists, report to the War Council. Jack's fingers twitched. He knew what was coming. He turned to Mira. Stay close. Together, they walked toward the VIP tower, where the tournament's leaders waited in the shadows. The doors hissed open. Inside, 5 towering figures sat on massive thrones, their faces hidden by golden masks. The overlords of the tournament, rulers of the strongest empires in the galaxy. And behind them, standing like a loyal hound, was Commander Roken, Jack's former friend, the man who had betrayed him. Jack clenched his jaw. What do you want? The center overlord leaned forward. His voice was smooth, but ice-cold. We want to offer you a choice, human. Jack said nothing. You and the Velari girl have impressed us, the overlord continued. Your kind is resourceful. Jack's fists tightened. They weren't impressed. They were afraid. You could join us, the overlord said. Serve our empire. You would be rewarded beyond your wildest dreams. Mira looked up at Jack, her eyes burning with defiance. Jack smirked. And if we refuse? The overlord's voice turned deadly. Then you die in the final match. Roken stepped forward, his eyes cold. There is no way out, Jack. You fight, you lose, and we erase you from history. Jack grinned. You're wrong about one thing, Roken. Roken frowned. And what's that? Jack's smile turned sharp. I don't lose. The final battle begins. The next morning, the final battle was set. The arena was packed, the air charged with anticipation and bloodlust. The final round of the tournament had always been a duel, a last fight between the two strongest warriors. But today, everything changed. The announcer's voice boomed through the arena. Asterisk, asterisk, ladies and gentlemen, for the first time in history, the final battle will be a 2-versus-1 match. The crowd exploded in shock. Mira's eyes widened. That wasn't how the finals worked. Jack scowled. They're changing the rules. And then, the gates opened, and their opponent stepped onto the battlefield. The monster of the Empire. He was a nightmare. 7 feet tall, half machine, half beast. A genetically engineered gladiator designed for one purpose: to kill. Cypher, the Emperor's executioner. His body was covered in cybernetic armor, pulsing with energy. His clawed hands crackled with plasma. He had never lost a match. He had never even been wounded. And now, he was here to end them. Jack rolled his shoulders. Well, this is gonna suck. Mira exhaled sharply. We can beat him. Jack grinned. Damn right we can. The gong sounded. The final battle began. A fight against death itself. Cypher moved first, and he was fast. Unnaturally fast. He closed the distance in a heartbeat, swinging his plasma-coated claws straight at Jack's head. Jack barely dodged, but the sheer force of the attack sent him skidding back. Mira darted in, striking at Cypher's exposed side, but his armor absorbed the impact. Cypher grabbed her by the throat and threw her across the battlefield. She hit the ground hard. Jack lunged forward, slamming a fist into Cypher's jaw. The impact barely moved him. Cypher smirked. You fight like an insect. Jack wiped blood from his lip. And you talk too much. Breaking the monster. They couldn't win in a straight fight. Cypher was too strong, too fast, too armored. But Jack had learned something long ago. Every machine had a weak spot, and every beast had a breaking point. Jack locked eyes with Mira. A plan formed between them. They moved. Jack went high. Mira went low. Cypher swung at Jack. He dodged, twisting behind him. Mira slid underneath, planting a small explosive device against Cypher's armor. The device beeped. Jack grinned. Boom. The explosive detonated. Cypher staggered, his armor sparking. For the first time, he looked surprised. Jack didn't waste the opening. He grabbed Cypher's wrist, twisted, and snapped the joint. Cypher howled in rage. Mira leaped onto his back, jamming a plasma knife straight into his exposed circuitry. The giant fell. The crowd screamed. And Cypher, the undefeated executioner, was defeated. The end of the tournament. Jack stood over Cypher's fallen body. Mira gasped for breath, bruised but victorious. The overlords stared down from their thrones. They had lost. Jack met their gaze, eyes burning with defiance. This tournament is over. The overlords didn't speak, but Jack knew what was coming next. They weren't going to let them leave. This wasn't a victory. This was a declaration of war. Jack exhaled. All right, he muttered. Round 2, then. Mira grinned through the pain. Let's make it a good one. A new beginning. The arena was silent. Thousands of spectators sat frozen in their seats, watching the impossible. Cypher, the Emperor's undefeated executioner, lay motionless on the battlefield. Jack Lawson and Mira had won. Blood dripped from Jack's knuckles. His breath was heavy, his body aching from the brutal battle. Mira, battered and bruised, stood beside him, her tiny frame still trembling, but unbroken. They had done it, but even as they stood victorious, they knew the fight wasn't over. Above them, in the towering VIP stands, the overlords of the tournament sat in stunned silence. And then, The skies darkened. The final betrayal. A thunderous voice echoed across the arena. Enough. The overlords stood, their golden masks reflecting the artificial sunlight. The central figure, the supreme overlord, stepped forward. His voice was calm, but deadly. "The tournament is over," he announced. "Jack Lawson, Mira of Velari." He paused, and then his voice turned cold. "You were never meant to leave this arena alive." The crowd gasped. Mira's eyes widened. "They're going to kill us." Jack smirked. "Yeah, shocking." Then, the floor rumbled. All around them, hidden turrets emerged from the arena walls. Above in the sky, dozens of war drones descended, their weapons humming with energy. And from the massive entrance gates, an army of enforcers poured in, armed to the teeth. The overlord's voice echoed once more. "Eliminate them. The escape begins." Jack grabbed Mira's wrist. "Run." They moved. The first energy blasts rained down from the turrets. Explosions erupted across the battlefield. Mira barely dodged a blast that scorched the ground where she had been standing. Jack dove behind a fallen pillar, pulling Mira down with him. A wave of plasma fire rained overhead. They were outnumbered, outgunned. No way to fight back. No way to win. And yet, Jack grinned, because he had expected this, and he had a plan. The underground resistance. A massive explosion shook the arena from below. The ground cracked. Then, from beneath the sands, hidden doors burst open, and an army of rebels stormed in. They came from the lowest ranks of the tournament, fighters who had been discarded, cheated, thrown away. Jack had been gathering them in secret. And now, they were ready. The battlefield erupted into chaos. Mira's eyes widened. "You planned this." Jack smirked. "I make things up as I go." Mira laughed despite the danger. Then they joined the fight, breaking the system. The overlords watched from above, their calm facade cracking. Their perfect system was falling apart. Jack and Mira fought side by side, taking down enforcers, dodging drone attacks, pushing forward. Jack caught a fallen blaster and fired back, dropping enemy after enemy. Mira, too small to hit, darted through the chaos, using speed and strategy to take down enemies twice her size. And then, Jack saw him. Roken, his former friend, standing at the gates, sword drawn, waiting for him. Jack exhaled. "I'll handle this." Mira nodded, then vanished into the chaos. Jack stepped forward. The final duel was about to begin. Jack versus Roken. The last fight. Jack and Roken circled each other, weapons ready. "You should have joined us," Roken said. "You could have had everything." Jack shook his head. "I already have everything. My freedom." Roken attacked first. The two warriors clashed. Steel against steel, fist against fist. They had fought together once. Now they fought to kill. Jack dodged a killing strike, twisted, and landed a brutal kick to Roken's ribs. Roken grunted but didn't slow down. He struck again. Jack barely parried in time. They fought with everything they had. No words, just steel, fury, and fire. Finally, Jack saw the opening. A tiny hesitation in Roken's movement. Jack didn't waste it. He struck fast, disarming Roken, twisting his arm, and slamming him into the ground. Jack pointed his blade at Roken's throat. Roken froze. Jack exhaled. "It's over." For the first time, Roken looked uncertain. And then, to Jack's surprise, he dropped his weapon. "I surrender," he whispered. Jack hesitated. Then he lowered his blade. "Come with me," Jack said. "Help fix what you helped break." Roken's hands trembled. Then, slowly, he nodded. The end of the tournament. The overlords saw Roken fall. They saw their armies failing. Their tournament was over. And so, they fled. Jack and Mira, bruised and bloody, stood in the center of the battlefield, victorious. The tournament was destroyed, but their fight wasn't over. Because now, they had an entire galaxy to change. Jack looked at Mira. "You ready for what's next?" Mira smiled, her eyes full of fire. "Always." Together, they turned toward the horizon. A new beginning, a new fight. And this time, they wouldn't be fighting alone. The revolution had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.